Our Creator, Redeemer, and Sustainer. Amen. Um, Apologies to those who are visiting, because you're not going to have like a normal sermon today, because this summer I hiked the Oregon section of the PCT, and everyone wants to hear about it, so I'm kind of going to go into that. Just answer all the questions all at once, and not have to, piecemeal it as much. Next week, I'm doing an AMA and Ask Me Anything, so this week, think about all those questions you ever wanted to ask about God or religion or the church or whatever, anonymously, and you can write them down and give them to me, and I'll do my best to deal with them. So that'll be next week, and then we'll get into some more normal Sundays. It was interesting hearing, I'd forgotten about the Ecclesiastes passage that I chose. That section comes right after the more famous section. You all know there's a time for grief, there's a time for joy, there's a time to make, there's a time to unmake, all that stuff. It's after that it has this wonderful passage about what God, I'm on. What God has fashioned, right? You can't add or take away from it. God has given us life to enjoy life, to have productive work, as Cecily talked about last week, about the positive benefits of work and labor, that there's something about being human, that we have things to do. We have things to share, right, that help form our life and change and form the life of other people. And then the whole section for Matthew about not being anxious, because I have to tell you, I got a book about the Oregon PCT, and it's overwhelming. Basically, I looked at it, I was like, okay, I got to take a break. I got to figure this out. Because it's just so many things, and it reminds me of the old saying, do you know how you eat a horse? One bite at a time. So there is a lot of planning. Especially the last month, I just decided, you know what? We need to come up with a plan of what I'm doing leading up to the day I leave. Right? There are a lot of checklists. Because when you're out there, in the middle of nowhere, and you forgot, your extra pair of underwear, guess what? And then there was a list of where I'm going to be at different times or where my goals are. Now, that quickly fell apart after the first week or two, because I ended up going a lot further than I had kind of planned a lot of the time. But there was a lot of planning going on. My first night, I got dropped off by Mike Campbell, who dropped me off down in Ashland, and it was in the evening, but I hiked 5 miles in and camped right there next to that's Pilot Butte. And that's Mount Shasta in the background, or in the morning, you can see Mount Shasta from where I was at. I saw Mount Shasta most of that day. And I hiked about 4 days to Mazama Village, which is at Crater Lake. And we hiked up around the Rim Trail, and I don't know if you know this, but you can go swimming at Crater Lake. You got to hike down about 900 feet, and then, of course, when you're done, you got to hike back up. But it is a great place to go swimming if you like to swim. And even if you don't really like to swim, it's not super cold unless you dive down a little bit, then it's really, really cold. But it is a beautiful place to go swimming. It's a beautiful place to go hiking. This is from the top of a place called the Watchman, which is kind of one of the higher points around the crater. While we were there, we stayed at Mazama Village, and there's a whole section kind of back in the woods that are set aside for PCT hikers. And Michelle came and met me, and it was, so one of the first things you need to know, one of the first terms you're going to hear around hiking the trail is trail magic. And trail magic is when you end up somewhere and someone has brought a chest full of soda and beer, fresh fruit, bags of chips, all the things that you can't bring on the trail, all the things that are just too heavy, you're just maybe you're carrying for a day, but you're not going to be carrying that for 5 days. They have chairs set up. You don't sit in a chair for days unless you bring a chair, which some people do. So there's trail magic. Michelle sort of brought trail magic to Mazama Village. She brought a flat of cherries and a bunch of candy and a bunch of chips, and we were very popular where we're at. And she brought a charger. because everyone uses a cell phone, even when you don't have service a lot. But there are apps that, because your phones have GPS, and there are apps that help you kind of follow the trail, keep you from getting lost. People, it's sort of a social thing, so people will make comments that are ahead of you a couple of days and say, oh, this water source is dried up, or, don't camp here, the mosquitoes were really, really bad. That's sort of a thing. And it's very helpful going along on the trail. It makes it much more survival, as I can say, but not survival, much more pleasant. So some of the other, another picture, there's a joke about like what do hikers look like whenever they get to a place with their service, and it's like a bunch of people looking at their phone. It's like, hey, I wonder what's going on with my family. I haven't heard anything from them in 4 days. Some other terms, zeros. So zero is the day that you don't really hike at all. So every week or so, there's a day where you just don't hike. Usually you might do laundry, or you might just eat a bunch of food. It's usually like in a town somewhere, or somewhere along the way, maybe a resort or a camping site that might have a store, might have a shower, laundry facilities. A Nero is a day that you hike less than 10 miles. So you might hike, I had a couple of, like my first day, I just hiked in about 5 miles. That would be considered a Nero. At the end of a couple of my hikes, I hiked extra the day before, so I was closer to a highway where I was getting picked up. So I just had 5 or 6 miles to do in the morning, that kind of thing. So Neros. Hiker midnight. You want to guess what time hiker midnight is? Yeah, 9 p.m. Basically, that's when it gets dark. And most people go to sleep right around between 8 and 9 o'clock, and are usually up around between 5 and 6. Kind of sundown. Now, there are people who night hike. They'll sleep till 10, 11 o'clock, and they'll get up and they'll hike to 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And they just put a headlamp on, and those people are going to be annoying if they come to your camp late at night. There's lights flashing around. But, hike your own hike. No one likes to be told that they're doing it wrong, especially if you've already been doing it for a couple of weeks or months at a time. Says, oh, you have the wrong pack, or why do you do this way, or you're carrying too much, you're carrying too little, or whatever. No one wants to hear that. Hike your own hike. Go as fast as you want, as slow as you want, as far as you want, as short as you want. Right? And a lot of times, when you meet someone who's like carrying 40 or 50 pounds, and you're just like, what are you doing? Like, you're carrying this letter? Hike your own hike. Do you. Trail names. So trail names are nicknames that you get. Usually, you receive a trail name. You are given a trail name. And it's usually when you hike with someone in a community for a while. So if you hike for a group for a while, you're probably going to get a trail name. I had several trail names. One, I'm not going to tell you what it is. The other one was just B, because I've just been hiking the Oregon section. I didn't hike with a group for weeks at a time. I hiked with a group for 4 or 5 days, and then I would have something change in my schedule, and I usually get up ahead or behind people, and I would see them again, and they would usually introduce themselves with their trail name, and I'd say, I'm Brennen, just Brennen. And so it became just Brennen, and then it became just B. And at the end, my tramley, so a tramley is a trail family. So as a group that you end up spending a lot of time with, and they're described as a tramley, this is my tramley. They call me Pops, because I was about twice as old as all of them. Every single one of them. So that's, my laser things that work? Does the laser pointer work? Oh yeah. So that guy, his name's Brian. He's not Dave. That guy is JP. He's was an old man. Because he used to do these exercises. He's also the youngest. Yeah. Still, he had knee problems early on, so he did all these stretches every day, and people kidded him about it. Called him old man. This guy, Evan, that's JP's brother. They're both from the Netherlands. His is 39. Because it took him 39 days to actually use a catapult, if you know what that is. That is Etienne Petit Soleil. So he's from Germany. So I hiked with one American and mostly people from other countries. Um, but it's just some of these families come from other trails, like people who've done the AT, they'll do the PCT together. Sometimes um, there are people who hike really, it's one of those things, it's a little bit like summer camp. You spend a lot of time with people for a week or two, and then you break apart, you don't see them for a while, and maybe when you see them again, it's like a big family reunion or something. Some people hike with their family the whole time, some people leave them behind, some people get ahead of them. Usually something happens, people have to get off the trail for a while for a variety of things and stuff like that. But it's kind of important. It's a real community kind of a thing. And people stay in touch with each other for years and years after. There was one group, like I said, they'd hike the AT together. There's like 7 or 8 of them, and they all decided they've been planning to hike the PCT for like 5 years together. And so they were out on the PCT hiking together. So your feet, and Steve, where's Steve Long here?
He's not here.
Oh, he's not here. So Steve, and I think Priest Sandra talked about this. Your feet are really important. Like really important. Like the whole thing of like Jesus washing people's feet, it takes on a new meaning because your feet are filthy dirty at the end of the day, or even before that. So every single day, at the end of the day, most people go down to a stream or a lake or wherever they're at and wash their feet. Because you're not bringing a fresh pair of socks every day. You rinse them out at the end of the day and you stick them on your pack so they can dry the next day. You usually have 2 pairs that you sort of swap in and out. And every time you stop, almost every time you stop, just for 10 minutes, you take your shoes and socks off so your feet can dry out. Right? And because if you don't do that, you will get blisters. And blisters can take you off the trail. Blisters can make your experience much less pleasant as you're hiking. So I basically, I had 2 pairs of socks, 2 pairs of underwear, and the clothes that I wore. And that's, I took a shower every once in a while. I'd go swimming. A lot of times I would just stop at a stream and especially rinse my shirt out just to get the salt off of it. Because you do sweat a lot and the salt can create sores and rub you raw, things like that. But when Michelle picked me up, she picked me and a friend of mine, Cream King. I had the car, and we dropped him off at government camp. It was just a few miles from where we were at. And when he got out and we were driving away, she goes, "You guys stink." And honestly, I had no idea. I had maybe if I stuck my nose in my armpit, but other than that, I did not really smell. So you do get used to it. You actually do kind of get used to it. But taking care of your feet is just supremely important. It really is. Your feet are the things that are carrying you for all those miles. After Lake, Mount Thielsen, there's a hiker trail that goes up there. It's about a mile off the main trail. So that's one of the more kind of, Thielsen's a really kind of epic kind of stratovolcano. It's an old one, I think. It's not very big, but guys at the top of that. And then, just lots of beautiful country. This is not, some people actually hike together. I didn't hike with anyone really. But you would see people when you stopped. And there's actually probably 5 or 6 more people at this stream. There's water, sometimes there are long water carries, like 15, 16, 17, sometimes 20 miles, depending on how you do it. But usually there's water every 4, 5, 6 miles. And that's where people stop for lunch or to take a break. And so you see people when you're stopping to take a break, you see people around lunchtime, you see people at camp and stuff like that, even if you don't see that many people when you're actually on the trail, if you're hiking on your own. Beautiful lakes. I think this is Maidu Lake. Green forests. And then, of course, this is up above Obsidian Trail. So the huge lava fields that you get, especially in central Oregon. This is Belknap Crater, Little Belknap Crater. So you get all of those wonderful, you get the lakes and the forests, the green forest, you get the lava fields. But you also get, the meadows, beautiful meadows. And certain areas were just pink flowers. So it's basically like walking through a garden, a beautiful flower garden. But there's also a lot of burn. The forest fires just in the last 5 years have burned huge. This is right before Crater Lake. Huge sections. I would say more than 50% of the trail is walking through burn. I actually have a little bit of a video. If you can start the video. This is getting into the Cedar Creek fire. The Cedar Creek fire just happened. I mean, I think there were a couple years that it happened, but the trail was all closed last year. And this is just getting into the Cedar Creek fire, which is around Sisters, south of Sisters. And it was a very hot fire. It was really devastating. Sorry if that's making a little motion sickness. And it was, actually, this isn't even the worst of it. But you can see how everything, the ground is just ash, burnt ash, and it's very thick. And the only trees standing here mostly are smaller trees. Those trees are all dead. They'll all be falling down soon. But you can see how some are stumps are completely burned out. The fire here wasn't super hot. It was hot. It was pretty bad, but it wasn't super hot. This area looked like a blast zone. It basically looked like a bomb went off. And when I was hiking through it, the bedrock campfire was going pretty strong, and the winds were blowing all of the smoke through this area. So honestly, it was like walking through an area where there was a fire happening. You know, it sort of felt like I just walked through there after the fire was done, you know. And this entire area for most of the day was just walking through this sort of stuff. It was, I mean, first of all, climate change is real. You know, the devastation in the forests and the things that are going on with our weather, just here in Oregon, the length of the summers, the dryness of the droughts. I mean, this year was a spectacular year because of all the snow, but all the snow melted quicker than average. So we had record snow levels, but the snow was gone by the middle of July, you know. So the snow melted very quickly. And it's just been devastating. Like I said, I mean, I hiked through days, like every 2 days of burn, I would be hiking 1 day through forest. It was kind of that bad. The Cedar Creek fire felt like walking through, I mean, I talked to people about this experience, a couple people who'd done it around the same day, and people say, I don't want to say it was beautiful. It was kind of haunting. It was like walking through, and honestly, the only word I have for it now is it was something that was holy. It was walking through a holy place. It was walking through a sacred place. It was kind of like walking through a graveyard in some ways. But it was really, it's one of those things, think about the things that stuck with me. You know, there's Crater Lake, the Cedar Creek fire, walking along Sisters. Some of these other areas were just amazing. Are we having trouble with the computer? Okay. But this really haunted me. But there were also some wonderful, beautiful, you know, we did a sunset up, this is around Mount Hood. And I have a sense of like Oregon in a different way than I did before, having sort of walked from the southern part to the northern part. You get a real sense of scale. I was hiking through Jefferson Park, and this is my first sight of Mount Hood back there, right? Just on the horizon. And this is the last day I saw it from the other side. On the other side as I was getting ready to go down to Cascade Locks. So you see mountains on the horizon, you walk and walk and walk, and then you walk past them, and then they disappear in the far horizon. It's really kind of not something you expect to experience. It takes a while to do that, but it's a very powerful experience. Uh, Mount Jefferson, Jefferson Park. If you've never been to Jefferson Park, that's a beautiful place. So a lot of beautiful places, a lot of like powerful experiences from the landscape. But there's also the people. And, these guys are my friends now. Most of them don't even live in the United States. But you really build a connection. The trail is a happy place. I don't know really how to explain it other than that. But the words of Jesus about not being anxious for tomorrow, about worrying about today, about like don't worry about what you're going to eat or drink, like those things really ring true. People have a phrase, the trail provides. We say God provides. Those things kind of work out to be the same thing on the trail. I've just known so many people who lost something or something broke, or they left something behind, miles behind, and they either make do, or someone gives them something, or they find something. There are things called hiker boxes. So, every 10 or 15 miles when there are resorts or these places that you can stay or a town, there's usually a hiker box where people leave something that they're not using, where you can find something that you might need, whether it's a food or equipment or whatever. There is a lightheartedness about the trail. This is just on a random tree. Just a random tree that I saw this. And you run across little pieces of art like this all the time. I can't tell you the number of times I saw like someone drew a smiley face in the dirt, So all these little sort of expressions of joy, expressions of life, and it's really amazing kind of when you're worried about food and water, when you're worried about these very basic things, or maybe you're not really worried about them. There's just these little gifts that you run across on the trail. So anyway, so when I think about what Cecily's, it's a lot of work. Going back to what Cecily was talking about last week, it is a lot of work. You're up, you're hiking. I did about 20 miles a day average hiking. Started around 6:30. I was usually done by 3, 4 o'clock, sometimes later, depending on how long I took my breaks and how many of them. So there is a work, but it's also something that to me was a real experience of that section of the Sermon on the Mount that we heard today. So I don't know. That's enough for me. I'm sure you have questions. People have been asking me questions. Say, well, I'll follow up. So just stick your hand up or whatever, and I'll. Doug. Yes. Food. So what did I eat? Question about food. I usually had those dehydrated meals in the evening, and then during the day I ate, I usually try to bring nuts and some dried fruit, just for vitamins and minerals. I had electrolytes stuff that I put in my water. And then we made there are these things called Scottish flapjacks, which are basically oatmeal and syrup and butter. So a stick of butter, 2.5-ish cups of oatmeal, a stick of butter. I put chia seeds in, syrup, brown sugar. You bake it. Each one of basically that's 2,400 calories in that. So I usually take I eat 1 or 2 a day, about 600 calories from that. But you are focused on calories. You really want to eat. So there was a day. So one of the worst thing that happened to me on the trail was I spent the end of a day and a morning waiting for a resupply that was supposed to be there that never came. And so I was losing hours, I was losing miles. I was really irritated. And there was no food. And that I was supposed to get, the main thing I was supposed to get was food. There was a little store there, but because I have celiac, I can't have anything gluten-free. So I couldn't really get anything out of the hiker box. And a lot of people eat a lot of ramen. So there's a thing called a ramen bomb, which is like one of those packets of mashed potatoes and a thing of ramen, and you mix those together. I can't have that, So basically, I lived for about 2 days on candy. I had beef jerky. I always had beef jerky. I had enough jerky. I had an extra meal that I had taken with me, thank goodness. And then I ate like M&Ms and Butterfingers and chocolate. And it's honestly, it's not that fun. But it's calories. And without calories, you can't keep going. Yeah. Does that answer your question? Anything? Okay. Gail. Yes, so she came and joined me at Mazama Village. And then in the middle of that, I went to Eugene for a couple of days to some friend's house when I was around San Am Pass. And we went camping with them for 2 or 3 days. And then when I got to Timberline Lodge, I went home for a day, took a 0 at home, and came back and finished the trail with my friends. Carolyn.
Water is heavy. What did you do about water?
Water is heavy. So the one thing you really worry about, ironically, is Oregon's really dry, especially in the south. So you have a water filter, that will filter out all the bugs that would make you sick. And usually you figure out how much water you need to go 5 or 6 miles. Or if it's a long day, 15, 16, 17. And so you might have to carry 3, 4 liters. And if you're going to dry camp, so you might dry camp far away from a water source, so you need to bring the water that you're going to need in the morning to get to the next water source. So I would say most of the logistics that you kind of worry about in a day, like what are you going to do in the next couple days, is around water and where you can get water. And how far is it off the trail? I mean, do you want to hike a mile downhill, 1,500 feet to get some water and then come all the way back? Or do you just want to keep going? And yeah. So most of the logistical planning is around water because it's heavy. Yep. Gee. Oh yeah. No one sleeps on the ground. I have an inflatable mattress. For a while they had these Z-rests. You ever see the little accordion things? People sleep on those. But a few years ago, maybe 10 years ago or more, they have basically they have these inflatable mattresses that you blow up, and they're rated, our value varies, but some of them are rated to well below 0. So the one I had was 25 inches, so I could lay on my back and not have my elbows falling on the ground. It weighed about 1 pound. And I'm old, I'm not gonna sleep on the ground. But I had a little thing that, for breaks, I could stretch out. It was about 1/8 of an inch. I could stretch. And some young guys actually will sleep on that, but not me. But I have that for breaks and stops to sit on. Yeah. Oh yeah, my mattress got a leak, so I had to wake up every 2 or 3 hours to blow it up. And then I spent 2 hours in the morning trying to find the leak and foolishly tried to repair it before it was dry. So I spent way too much time in the morning fiddling with that. But I got it repaired, and I switched it out because it started to leak, not as bad, but it started to leak again, so I got another one. Yeah. Yeah, you don't want that. But that little mat I have is just enough to keep you from being completely miserable if you completely run out. Chip, question? Oh, okay. Yeah. Around somewhere between 450 and 500 miles. Yeah. Because I didn't go all the way to the border because it's a real hassle to get down all the way to the border. It's just about 25 miles from the border to where I started. And I'm not going to worry about it. So, yes? A lot of wild animals. In the southern part of the trail, I saw a lot of deer, much more than north of there. A lot of young deer, some older deer, a lot of squirrels and rabbits. I didn't put this up here. There was one, I was walking alongside the Sisters, it was this meadow, and I saw these huge birds. When I first saw them, I was like, that looks like an ostrich, but there's no way it's an ostrich. And I took some pictures of them, but they were far away. I didn't want to get close to them. And the bird was about this tall. It was a big bird. And it had those long skin. It was some kind of a crane or a heron or a stork or something. I don't know what it was. I asked someone who kind of knows about birds. They weren't sure what it was. So that was kind of the thing that sticks in my mind. I saw some mountain lion tracks a couple of times. No mountain lions, thankfully. I didn't really see any sign of bears. So saw some elk tracks, no elk. The trail is fairly well traveled. So animals that don't like people kind of don't come close to the trail much. And that would include bears. Yeah. So, anything else? Yes? No, it would be nice if it was. This is a really old mark. I took pictures of a couple different marks. It is marked in places. The other thing that you have to be aware of is something called blowdown. So every year trees fall down, and they fall down across the trail. And it's not easy to get out there. I ran across a couple crews sawing trees. Sometimes they bring power saws, and sometimes they just bring the old handheld things because they're so far back. But sometimes the trees that fall are the ones that have marks on them. And when it's burned, there are a lot of areas. So the GPS is really helpful for that. Yeah.
How much weight did you carry?
I probably carried I would say average, probably about 20 pounds. Yeah. So I have a lot of sort of lightweight equipment because I'm old. And I'm not young enough to carry 40 or 50 pounds for a week. It also helps you go faster. So I had a very lightweight backpack. Like I said, I didn't bring any extra clothes. By far the heaviest thing usually was food. I have a lightweight puffy. I have very lightweight fleece and fleece leggings that Michelle made. And so I had if it got a little cold, I could put my fleece on. If it got really cold, I could put my puffy on. That's carried me through way below zero or way below freezing. My tent weighs just over a pound. And same with my backpack, weighs just over a pound. So I have a stove. I brought the stove but the stove is about this big. And it's made out of titanium. So it weighs 2 or 3 ounces. The fuel is what's heavy. Now some people do what's called cold soaking. So you don't cook your food. You have a little container and you put oatmeal or couscous or quinoa in there, and you put it whatever mix, and if you want fruit or berries or nuts or whatever, and you just seal that, and then every couple hours you take it out and you eat what's there and you refill it again, you put some water in, you seal it, and you don't have a hot meal until you get somewhere where they serve hot meals. So a lot of people do that. I thought about doing that, but I ended up not doing it because I didn't want to do anything that was too new. All the stuff I did on the trail I'd done before. So physically I was prepared, mentally I was prepared. I'd done all this stuff. I'd slept outside a lot of times. So I sleep just as well in a tent as I do at home now. So, but I had not experimented enough with cold soaking that I was ready to do it for 3 days or 4 days or whatever. So.
What was the temperature range?
We had a night got down to 35 once. Oh, geez. We need to wrap up. Sorry. It got down to about 35. It got up to the 80s or 90s because you're up at altitude most of the time. So I know that one short.
Were there any times that you were afraid?
No, not really. Sometimes crossing a stream on a log makes me a little nervous. I spent a couple nights alone, or no one came until really late at night. And that was all right. Makes me a little nervous, but not enough to not sleep. So, yeah. All right, let's